It's the Lekker Rugby Pod, only on Megaphone Rugby.
It's a Lekker Rugby Pod, episode 72. That's now without all our special editions and the likes. And Harry's been in constant contact with the Harry Index, the mythical oracle, and he seems to be hiding in the corner, a bit confused. Harry, what's going on with the Harry Index?
The Harry Index is very mystical, shrouded in mystery. Many people have tried to pierce it and influence it, even corrupt it, but it's incorruptible. It lives somewhere in either the Anatolian mountains of Turkey, where the Ark came to rest, or I've also heard that it sometimes docks somewhere in the Greek islands. It's removed. You're not going to find it, guys. Don't even try. The Harry Index does confide in me. It's very difficult to listen to because of not having a mouth and actual vocal cords, but it says things to me like, "This is a really hard weekend to judge." And so, what I would say is the Harry Index is delayed. It's still in rough draft form. It's in the third draft, and where it's struggling is in the middle. It's in the middle of the top 10. People who follow devotees of the Harry Index know that there's sometimes the top 12, sometimes the top 15. Beginning of the season, it tends to be top 15, and then it kind of shrinks back down. And right now, it's right at top 10. But sometimes there's a shared position. The difficulty of doing cross indexes is that we're not always sure what the middle is, the mean, the median of each league is. We know the top, obviously. The top's easy. But the top can only be judged by what it's facing in some ways. So a team could look better than it is if, for example, if the URC is weak. Like there's an allegation been made that it's very, very, very weak. Well, it's not very, very, very weak, but let's say that it's weak. Like that's possible, right? We're not living in La La Land. Super Rugby is definitely weak. There are parts of the Prem that are really insipid. So what do you do with all that? How do you benchmark it? That's why the Harry Index gets paid the big bucks on his Turkish or Greek mountain, is because people are thirsty for it. They want to know it. And there's two big problems with judging these. One is the length of the top 14 and the shortness of Super Rugby. Those are outliers. Other thing is that Test Rugby gives us extrapolation power so that we can extrapolate downwards. So if the All Blacks are perennially number 1, 2, or 3 in the world, and right now at this very moment probably second-ish, and they only draw from people inside their clubs, and if the All Blacks are predominantly in 1 or 2 clubs, then there's no power on earth that's going to convince the Harry Index that those teams are not good if they're top of the league, even if the bottom of their league is not great. So really the big inquiry becomes the middle of the leagues. It's the middle of the leagues that matter a lot to the Harry Index, is discerning, and sometimes it's retroactively. Sometimes you think Munster was good and then you realize later it wasn't that good. Sometimes you think the force was, sailing well and you realize, nah, the Western force is nothing. And so it's only in retrospect that you have to retrograde. And right now, because some trajectories are on the way up, like the Northampton Saints are playing, really well, but the Saracens are fading. Gloucester is just sort of bang average, and the Harlequins appear to have given up. It makes the whole narrative of the season of the Premiership different. So how good is Bath? Why is the Premiership just as a whole, both on the average and then the stretch of the top and the bottom, is it just a little bit lower than we thought? And so, Bristol is a good example of this. Maybe the shape of game is not really up to it. Harry Index imagines a mythical cross competition world event where you have the top 48 teams-ish going head to head on maybe a 2-game knockout system. And then in the end, who's left standing in the top 4, and then who can win it all. And in this thought experiment, everyone's healthy. The weather is perfectly averaged between all types, and everyone's home and everyone's not home, and it's just all evened out, and everyone's eating the same food they like, etc. And so in that scenario, Leinster has sort of tried to go wire to wire. Kind of they saw off the Toulouse challenge for now, but it looks like they're headed back for maybe a revenge mode, unless the Saints do something weird, or in the French league, you never know. It's like Bordeaux can have their day. But I find a lot of interest in it because we don't have one. We don't have this. We have world rankings in Test rugby, but we don't really have that in club rugby. And the Champions Cup pretends to do that, but it's not, because you're not factoring in, the Crusaders. For the last 15 years. The Crusaders have been clearly among some of the best teams in club rugby. So yeah, we're looking at it. Harry Index is probably going to give me a call, or Sanskrit will be delivered by an albatross, and then I'll figure it out.
I'm a bit surprised. I sort of pictured the Harry Index to be in the cloud somewhere, like a mythical being. Like this thing about the ship in the Greek islands that totally confuses me, man.
Yeah, I don't know. I cannot speak for the Harry Index. I cannot explain it. And that's just the way it is.
Well, just briefly, to get serious for a second, remember to subscribe to this channel, please. We want to get to 20,000 subscribers by the end of June. So I worked it in there. I forgot it in the beginning, but I worked it in there now. So tell me, just still on a serious subject, this nonsense about the URC being so weak. You mentioned it earlier compared to the Super Rugby now. I hear what you're saying about the All Blacks probably being the second best team in the world now, and they only play in Super Rugby. But does that mean necessarily that the URC is that bad? Or I hear what you said. We're not living in La La Land. It might be not as good as we think it is. But is it really that bad as Stephen Donald makes it out to be?
No, I mean, the URC is clearly above Super Rugby. I'll put it that way. And when I say clearly, I'm not starting an argument or something. It just is. Why can I say that? Part of it's just numbers. So Super Rugby starts out with a disadvantage from the beginning in that it's, a group of teams, 11 teams, compared to the mass of 45 teams. So it'd be very odd if, for some reason, 1/4 of the rugby playing teams in the world were markedly better than another slice of 16. That just doesn't make any sense because of the contracts you have to get, the number of players, and then the proof of wallaby fragility. So if wallabies also only pick from Super Rugby, then if they're going to be a lot better than Ireland and the Box, then we need to see something more, especially from a smaller pool of players. You would almost think like they would be much better. And that's not true. So we can sort of back extrapolate that the Australian portion of Super Rugby is weak. I'm not going to say very weak, but it's weak. And then you look at, so what's the two weakest, Waratahs and Force? How would they match up against the Stormers, right in the middle of the IRC? How would they match up against, let's see, Edinburgh, Scarlets, Munster, Benetton, Ulster? Where would the Force rank in there? Only a fool would think that the Force would wipe that. So for it to be very, very, very weak, you would think the average of the Super Rugby needs to beat the average of IRC pretty easily, but that's not true at all. I don't think that the Western Force would enjoy any scrum against the Stormers, any line out against Edinburgh, any broken play against Benetton, Brex, Monticello. I don't think even like the 10th placed, so actually near the bottom, Ulster is an easy beat for Western Force to go on a Friday night. Concomitantly, we turn it around. We know exactly what it would look like for the Stormers to go play in Australia because we saw that for many, many years. But even if you just go to a team like Munster or Edinburgh and wonder about that, I think it's really unlikely when you look at the depth of the bench of Super Rugby, which is a sprint league over in a flash, refereed in a very fast-paced manner. I think they would be surprised at the quality of the mid-range of the Irish, South African, and I guess the Scottish only have two teams. But whatever the weakest team of Scotland, I think they'd be surprised at how easily they can handle high speed. I'm not so sure that the Australian teams could handle right now, which is to their detriment in Test rugby, the mauls, the scrums, the set pieces, the tight loose. when you put that into the context of Champions League and wonder about how that works, then you run into the French problem. And there, I think, Bordeaux brings Pete Samu off the bench. Pete Samu would start in every Australian team. There's a lot of Australians playing in these European competitions, and they all say it's more of a grind, and they all say they became better players. James Lowe, Jamison Gibson Park, Mac Hansen, Bundy Aki got better, not because of any training or physique, but because of the mental aspects of playing in Ireland. It lofted them up. So this fight wasn't started by the North, by the way. So when I say all this, I'm not trying to pick a fight with Stephen Donald. I'm saying you said something, so we're just analyzing how it looks. Now, I think that's not true, that you can compare the URC disfavorably, unfavorably with Super Rugby. I think you can say that the top is probably, I think Leinster is a better team than anything the Super Rugby can muster right now, because you're just basically starting the Irish team and throwing in Archie Neyman and Geordie Barrett. Geordie Barrett was the best back in the Hurricanes, and the Hurricanes miss him a lot. Archie Neyman is a weird animal that doesn't even exist in Super Rugby. So, and then you say Nienaber is a defensive coach. There is no defensive coach in Super Rugby that is on anyone on the same level as Nienaber. They don't even do the rush defense. There's no blitz. There's no umbrella even shutting in Super Rugby. The only team that comes close is the Hurricanes. When you look across, Opta Johnny does great stat gathering, and I'm a devotee of that. Crawl right in there. And so you cannot really do some statistics across competitions, but I'll tell you an example of when you can. If you start looking at scrum completion rates, scrum success, you'll see that Super Rugby is incredibly high. And you go, oh, wow, must be great scrums. No, it's the opposite. That's a showing that it's terrible scrums, because everyone's scrum gets completed. And then you look at the stat on Opta Johnny that has scrum wins by penalty on the other guy's scrum. And then you see teams like the Bulls who can attack your scrum. If you stuck that Bulls scrum in Super Rugby right now, and the refs were open to reffing it to penalty, it would be a bloodbath. You would never even get off the floor. And so top 14 is an incredibly brutally physical game. And so scoring in opponents 22, the red zone completion rate, terrible in top 14, because when you get in there, you just get murdered. Super Rugby, once you get in the 22, you score. There is almost no scramble defense. So we can look at the stat that Opta Johnny uses a stat. Line breaks that you suffer, so line breaks against you, where they turn into a try. If you compare the 45 teams, club teams, Super Rugby is 5 of the top 6, for example, And then you look at the bottom and go, there's no bottom, no Super Rugby doesn't even appear there. So if you get a break, you're scoring. Whereas in a scramble defense league like the URC, where you have leckerbacks aplenty, you have double action players, you have a guy who can make a tackle, get back and make another tackle because they have Olympic level speed, doesn't exist in Super Rugby. There's no second line defense. So if you make a break in the Chiefs, you just run through and score. So then the pushback from Super Rugby is, but you say that about our defense and look at the scores that are going on in the URC, say Leinster versus Glasgow. And that's true. You have to grapple with that. Intellectual honesty is important. And we're not ducking the best arguments. But across the board, you see 8 to 4 tries, 6 to 3 tries. The number of tries scored and conceded is very high in the Super Rugby. And what Leinster does is they'll score on you and then won't let you score, even in the 79th minute. That doesn't seem to exist in Super Rugby. There is a sort of gentleman's agreement that in the final 10 minutes, if I'm up by 35 points, you can run in and score. So that's not adequate preparation. Clayton McMillan is leaving Super Rugby, the Chiefs, to go to Munster. Why would he leave a team that's challenging for Super Rugby to go coach Munster, which is mid-table? And what he said was that Australian teams don't even recognize what they lost when South Africans were kicked out of Super Rugby or opted out or whatever. The truth is somewhere in between there, by the way. But there was a fracture, a divorce, And Clayton says, good old school coach too, modern but old school, great combination. He said, we really need to play different styles. And New Zealand has always been among the top because we always made sure we played young South African forward packs that taught our young guys what level of ferocity and violence there is in rugby. And we don't get that anymore because we don't have proper opposition. And that's why we're struggling when we go play the French or we are in a World Cup. We're not the favorites anymore. And he said it's completely bound up in that. And he said the Irish, are getting that now. They get the South African examination. When they go, pack down for a scrum, they get bride. So, the Kiwis are missing that fire pit of examination. So he wants to go to Munster to be part of this combination of styles of the ERC, which is what I'll say makes the thing. It's not a diversity argument. I'm not trying to go down that way. I'm just saying that you learn more when you face things you don't know about in life. And so having to prepare for a 4G pitch against a supersonic Scottish backline 1 week, and now you got to go and you got to play in the humidity of the Shark Tank against Eben Etzebeth and Oxenche. And then the next week, you're going to have to go play Connacht in the wind where they go wide, third receiver every play. And then you're going to go try to grapple with the Stormers and whatever they pitch up with. It's all just guessery. And coaches love that because by the end of the season, they've got cataloged file books and dossiers of so many different things. So Jake White could now have these cross references and learning as he goes. Clayton McMillan was saying the problem with coaching for the Chiefs against the Hurricanes, against the Highlanders, against the Blues is nothing really changes. And there's no ability to stretch yourself. And the All Blacks, NZRU, prefers that when they're grooming their next All Black coaches, prefer that they go overseas. The proof's in the pudding there. So you never see the officials from NZ say what Stephen Donald was saying because they're not delusional. They are very smart operators. And Razor got a lot from being overseas. And even from the Aussie coaches, you look at Checker and how good he was because, he coached Leinster. He knew the different styles. So I don't think that the Stephen Donald argument is A, the official argument of New Zealand. B, I don't think that you should just wave it away and say, you can never compare competitions. I think the Harry Index does a very good job, by the way. I think you must compare competitions. It's the essence of life. It's interesting. It's the stuff of sports talk radio and why pods exist. And it's never going to be completely solved because if this year the Bulls go on a hot run, knock everyone off and win, you're not going to really just come away thinking that means they're better than Leinster as a whole. But you would say this season they are. So, it's this forever debate about player personnel, coaching tactics. Like, I don't think Glasgow was a better team all in all by beating Bulls in the final. But you have to give them their props. They get to be the reigning champs. But right now it's such a tough game in the Northern Hemisphere, and for the Southern Northern Hemisphere, South African teams to balance player load, contract disparity, budget disparity. So it's forever going to be an argument, and quite frankly, I'm all for it. But I don't like demeaning arguments or unthinking assertions. Stephen Donald had said recently in a prior clickbaiting utterance that he didn't even know the French players. Okay. All Blacks, you've lost 3 times in a row to the French, which is just one less than 4 times to the Springboks. You better start learning these guys' names, or you're just going to keep losing. And so I think that's, I don't know if it's detestable, but it's disappointing because I don't think the All Blacks of old talked like that. And I'm for sure thinking that a guy like Dan Carter, Richie McCaw, they absolutely respected their enemies. They knew everything there was to know. There's that old Kiwi hooker that became friends with Bismarck Duplessis, would come visit him on the farm. I mean, they loved their enemies. They were into it. there is a bit of insularity that happens when you try to build a lager and you circle your wagons and you say, we're good here. You don't get as good as you do. The metaphor here is South Africa itself. Like, when was South Africa ever better than this? So you could argue that they were been as good, but this is really a pinnacle. And what the hallmark of this particular era of Springbok rugby is that about half of the players play in Japan, and that you have Johan van Graan winning the league part of the Prem, and you have, Porto Human tearing up trees with Houston. You've got guys like Jacques Nienaber deeply inculcated into the Leinster, the Dublin scene. You've got so much IP out there. Andre Pollard challenging number 2 in the Prem as a fly-off, like just seeing different things. And then you bring them back in, and then you celebrate all that difference. And you have a Felix Jones, and you have a Jerry Flannery, and a Tony Brown. It's not your father's Springboks, right? It's a different look. And my worry for the All Blacks, which I'm sure they'll correct, by the way, is they're getting too much into themselves and burrowing into a cycle of repetitiveness where every game looks like the other game and nothing is that memorable, and the struggle is missing, the real pain that it takes to get better at something.
Just on that subject, and you mentioned Australian teams, big thing this year, of course, the British and Irish Lions. Are they going to be lambs led to slaughter? I mean, I'm not an Australian rugby supporter or anything. I'm just looking from the outside. I'm interested, hearing what you said just now. Seeing that clearly the weaker part of the Super Rugby tournament as well. What's going to happen in that thing? Because that's also a northern versus southern hemisphere thing. And let's make it clear, we are firmly rooted in the southern hemisphere, yeah, even though we play our rugby in the north.
I would never want the Lions to win, right? I want them to go home every time. But of the 3 teams they play, so they win about 27% of the time, I think, in New Zealand. They win about 30-something% of the time in South Africa, but they win more than 50% in Australia. So the Lions are successful in Australia. And I, for one, would like to see that not happen this time. I want to see the Wallabies win. And so the question becomes, and by the way, the Lions are always better, scratch team notwithstanding, they're always better than the individual parts. So if you took the record of each one of those home nations in Australia, they are worse than the Lions in Australia. Same thing would hold for South Africa, same thing. So it's daunting, because the Irish would alone be considered prohibitive favorites and Wallabies. And now you just get to add exactly who you want from others. Maro Itoje. You just stick in exactly what you want. So you could just throw in a particular toolkit. If you think Tom Curry is going better than Josh van der Flier, you throw him in there. You get a little bit better. You get 2% better here and 4% better there. Your bench is definitely better, right? So the bench of the Lions will be better than the Irish bench, because you can bring in like exactly what you want on 9, 10, 15, and the attack never stops. However, the big but is Joe Schmidt. If there's a coach that can do what needs to be done in the Wallabies, it's Joe Schmidt. He started modest. He didn't pick some of the old favorites. He picked guys like Jeremy Williams at lock that no one saw coming. Carlo Tizzano at open side, with Fraser McWright and Carlo Tizzano. They've got deck players. They've always had the Pococks and the George Smith types, so they can play on the deck. They've got Rob Valentini, who's not in any way going to look across the scrum and look at whoever the Lions pick, whether it's Ty Byrne at Big Six or Cunningham South. He's not going to look at them and say they're better than him. Front row with Angus Bell and Tanyela Tupou can scrum with the best. They have a bench weakness in the front row. And then, depending on who they pick at lock, whether it's Will Skelton or the Arnold brothers or guys like that, they can hang. The problem to me comes at 9 and 10. And so I think that's where the Lions have a tremendous advantage over the Wallabies, who are still sort of trying to figure out, with Noah Lolesio going off and then not be able to be picked probably. It's a weird scramble. You have young Tom Lina, you have at scrum off, you have very bad passing Tate McDermott, pretty good kicking Jake Gordon. It just doesn't leap out as an era in which the Australian playmakers are old enough, ready enough, and fit for purpose. So I think that's tough. Home does matter, so you always give a home team in rugby a few points. Having a series though cuts against the Wallabies because it exposes if you use Jake White's formula of doing 1.5 to 2.5, injury or niggle, and then you bring someone back maybe, so you're kind of at a 1.5 loss ratio. By the time you're in the third test in Sydney, and if it's a decider, you're 6 players down or so, and so now you're seeing your weakest people in your 35-man squad having to come on in the 23. That's not going to bother you if you're the Lions. I mean, who's your weakest player in the Lions? It's the best player from Scotland or the best player from Wales. Jack Morgan, he's not bad, but he's, from Wales. That's not going to be possible for the Wallabies. They can pick overseas. They're allowed to. It has some restrictions, but quite frankly, Joe Schmidt has said he wants to stick with the local players if he can. So right now, looking at July and saying what I think, it should be a Lions sweep, and it should be tough. And every game going to the full hour, but that final 20 minutes, a bit of a worry. The one thing I would say is Schmidt will understand Farrell. He was his teacher, and Schmidt will might have had some of the comfort of studying all of the home nations teams and the Six Nations, locked in a lab, honed in, and negating some of those strengths can be something that Schmidt is very good at, and he can bring a team down to the level that he wants to bring them down to sometimes.
Talk to me about the URC. Now we're going into the bad URC, the weak URC. Seeing that it's so bad, let's talk about that for a bit. The Bulls, you were with the Bulls in Munster. You got a bit of an inside view there, which I think you were very privileged to do. I mean, they let you in basically, which I think says a lot. And then secondly, against Glasgow, put those 2 wins overseas in perspective for me from a non-Bulls fan. People ask me in the comments, have I recovered yet from all the giddy excitement and the likes? You're more neutral. Tell me how much do those 2 victories mean for the Bulls? Are they now on the up here? What's happening with them?
I think mentally that's huge. You do the thing where you say, what would you have liked before? And if you had gone into this and said 2 wins, it would have been party time. People would have thought maybe you're too optimistic. A split would have been fine. A losing bonus point. No, the wins. That's a belief structure. That means a somewhat young team, because there's some youth there you're working with. Like, you just forget about how young they are. I think maybe captain's run, hanging out, also at the celebration bar at the end of the match, I was struck with, Johan Goosen's not that young, I suppose. Villy's not young, but there's some other guys walking around, they're just kids. And some of them are away for a month in Europe for the first time in their life. They're impressionable. They're emotional. They can be up, they can be down, like we all were when we were 22, 23. So it's super important for the players to trust in their coaches' game plans. And they did tweak them. It wasn't just, let's play our best, and if we do this, we'll do fine. And no, they were actually adaptive game plans. And those game plans worked. So now when they come in with clipboards and PowerPoints and they say, and so this is how we're going to overcome our first playoff opponent in the quarterfinal, they're going to believe in it. And belief is super important in a combat collision sport, because you're scared. Isya Bong, Macaplan. You get scared. Not everything goes your way. Have you watched Artie Surveyor with a mic on? When he runs into a contact, he screams the whole time. And they interviewed him and said, "Is that your way of a war cry?" He goes, "No, I'm like pissing my pants. I'm scared of contact. Everyone's bigger than me." When you're saying to a guy like, over the weekend, like the smallest stormer forward was the man of the match. And he was putting his hands in the cookie jar and getting smashed by the Italian test team, basically. So I think the Bulls are similar in that you have some guys like Marco van Staden. They're not the biggest fellows. Cameron Honeycomb, the high carrier, high tackler, the highest offloader and jackler of the Bulls. He's not overpowering in his presence. And so he has to believe that when the coach says, this is how we're going to win this game by making our opponent play differently, or, we talked about the strengths of Glasgow and how you could welcome the strengths. You're not going to shut them out all game. It shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that the last 10 minutes was squeaky bum time. They're going to score their points. It's a matter of, can you get enough on the board early enough, squeeze them in the beginning that they have scoreboard pressure, and then they react like every human being under pressure, which is they don't play as well. But now the Bulls will go on that long flight thinking we're in good hands. Our coaches know what they want to do. They can put us in the best positions to succeed. I believe in our practices. I believe in our drills, and I believe in our variations. Most importantly for the Bulls, if they end up having to play a final away from home, then they will believe they can win. One of the things about being a home-based team and a fortress, Loftus, and, we just get back home, now we're going to win. Like, if you can go to Limerick and you can go to Glasgow and you can pull away wins on two very different pitches, one being the most non-4G and the other one being the most 4G, back-to-back like that, with wind, with rain, with weird calls for you, weird calls against you. You just kind of you just stay in there. You're like Muhammad Ali, rope-a-dope. And you look at the stat sheet. So the Bulls won with one less try, a lot less possession, only 39% possession. Didn't have the field position really over the course of the match. Half the number of line breaks that Glasgow had. Didn't, with Cameron not on and Marcel also gone, only 22 defenders beaten, where Glasgow beat 51 defenders. So Bulls fell off a lot of tackles. I mean, a lot of that was padded at the end, but still. Offloads 11-6 against the Bulls. It's missed tackles, 50 missed tackles. You don't usually win a game and praise your defense when you miss 50 tackles, but it's fair because they were sending shooters up. Sometimes when Kane and Moody would miss a tackle, first of all, the attacker would pray to God and say thank you because he was really massively mooring people. But it creates a shape where it's funneled into the middle. And now you can have your Kubas Visas of the world not have to take more than one step to the side before he crunches you. You also reduce the idea of cards, even though there was that issue. It does take down the risk factor. Turnovers is where the game was won, because if you have an 8 turnover margin to the positive the Bulls had, it negates a lot of those carries and line breaks and so forth, because you're even at the end of a line break, if you're turning it over, the stat sheet will show that you ran 50 meters, you had a line break. Doesn't really mean much if you get turned over. And the other thing is the kick meters, 875 kick meters for the Bulls, 500 for Glasgow. Having a 375 meter difference on a bouncy track on a windy night, super cool. And then keeping penalties sort of the equal, 11-11. So the funnel attack, you funneled the Glasgow's attack, you had a good start, and there was chase and effort all night long. Even at the end, where the defense fell off, there was still effort, and so it prolonged the fight back. And what I said in our little Bulls WhatsApp chat group was, even if everything goes wrong and the Bulls are really stupid right now, they're going to win. And then, they literally did everything stupid and made all those mistakes.
You must never say that again. Don't tempt fate, Harry. I'm going to freaking delete that comment next time. I'm telling you right
No,
now.
but it was true. And the game ended with the Bulls deciding whether or not to go up 10 or 7. So it's a proper victory. And the point is that they had played the clock correctly. They had got themselves in a position where there really wasn't any way for Glasgow to win that game unless they took a kick, hit the poles, caught it, and then ran 80 meters. So in the retrospect, I think a lot of people said, why not go for the kick? I think Jake's explanation holds up. It's a very conservative play, and not all coaches would have done that. Some coaches would have taken the pot shot and just told the kicker, keep it very low and drive it through. I mean, make sure you hit the stands, really high up behind it. Do not try to, finesse it over. But yeah, I think all in all, you would say that a 2 versus 3 or in the Harry Index 5 versus 6 clash is tectonic. We must point out for our Glaswegian friends that we know that the Glasgow team wasn't the Glasgow team of choice. If you put it on the pitch, that's not really what you love. But the same thing can be argued for the Bulls. And so you just have to sometimes you take the competition where it is. It was a fantastic weekend for all South African teams, even the Sharks.
I'm going to just throw a Super Rugby curveball in here again. In the old days, Super Rugby, one of the biggest problems we had was the long travel periods, away from home for a month at a time, the likes. The Bulls are away from home for a month now. But suddenly, I think that worked to their benefit. They started to gel a bit as a team, as a unit, because they spent time together, a lot of time together. And they were also put up in proper, almost luxurious, sounds like accommodation, or like in Biarritz. They had a good time. And how important do you think that was, getting that team to gel the way that it did? And, don't we miss that in terms of Super Rugby compared to URC?
Yeah, I think there's a mentality shift. I think it trickles down from the box, which is to be better travelers, to be more open to the idea. The problem with Super Rugby was the percentage, the ratio of time. If you had a competition where all 3 of your opponents were so far away, then 75% of your travel, I'm not sure I'm doing the right mathematics here, but whatever, you know what my point is, big predominance of your time is in transit. And even when you're going to have a home game, it's on the tail end of getting back. So it's not really going to help you. If you jetted across and had 3 or 4 connection flights to get to Christchurch and then you come back. So there was always a weight that, not complaining, not whining, and not making excuses, but it always was going to drag down the South African teams in a way that was probably insurmountable. Even the Lions getting to 3 straight finals and all that, the Bulls sometimes having their way, Stormers being there or thereabouts, difficult to beat in Cape Town, but not really, properly challenging. It just felt like the ratio of travel was terrible, and it was set up to fail. What Argentina did is they just basically had the whole national team, Pumas, become the Jaguares, and then they could challenge for the title because it was basically having a test team inside it. And fair play to them. They were amazing travelers. And Argentina has, in general, had to live out of suitcases to play proper top rugby, and still do. The IRC with its time zone, the lack of big time zone gap, and the fact that north-south travel is way easier on your body, and I speak somewhat as someone who travels a lot, it just doesn't matter, that much at all. There's that. And then also the way the Shield thing is arranged, where you have more inter-provincial games that feature, and so you can plan your tour better. The Bulls always knew there was going to be this month, and they could get their mind around it. The complication, of course, is these cup things in the Euro. But I think Super Rugby actually was really good for South Africa in some ways as well, because the hardest problem in rugby for most of rugby's life has been how to win in New Zealand. I mean, like that. Let's just be honest. The stats show us that. Right now, it's also really hard to win in South Africa, and it's been hard for most of rugby as well, for all teams except for New Zealand. But the overall record of New Zealand in South Africa is still, uncomfortably close to 50-50, and which is why it's cool to win a lot, because it pads that little, that edge. So I think it's important that these tours are coming back between Boks and All Blacks, because it revives that competition. Because to me, New Zealand still is the pinnacle and the epitome of the opposite kind of playing rugby to the Boks. The Irish, notwithstanding, doing very well at it, but I think the All Blacks still better at it. Of the counter, the kick return, fractured field. I think they can assemble the second best scrum in the world. I think All Blacks have very good line-out technique. And so it's a bit of a shame too. In a perfect world, you would move New Zealand, the whole 2 islands. Well, I guess there's more islands than that, but you'd move all of New Zealand and stick it, somewhere just next to Langebaan or
Madagascar.
Off the wild coast. And then it would be really cool. And then it would be number one and number 2 forever and ever and ever. But the distance does, it plays a part, and it's just always going to be a problem for New Zealand. It's probably one of the reasons why they actually became really, really good was the remoteness and isolation. But I think it hurts them in 2025 when rugby technology and rugby analysis is caught up, and so there's no way for the Kiwis to do mystical things on the shaky isles that you don't see for 5 years, and they rock up into the British Isles and kill everyone. And now everyone studies everything, and there's a Kiwi on every team, and Ireland's full of them. So I just think we're at a different age now, where everyone studies everyone's stuff and they can know it. Interestingly enough, I think one of the best defensive coach of our generation, of the century, Jacques Nienaber, is in the URC. And if you could just move him to Super Rugby and put him on a properly athletic side that he could motivate, it would change a lot. If you had a team in the Super Rugby that didn't let you score, everyone had to adjust. It's just everyone lets you score. And so the competition is more about who can outscore. And we all know that in the knockouts of Super Rugby, it'll change, that the scores will shrink, just like old knockout rugby. And same thing for the URC. I feel like there's a couple of surprises yet to happen before this season's over.
Well, one of those surprises might be that the Stormers might end up having to come to Loftus. That might be a problem. And suddenly the Stormers seem to be on the up. I told Jake the other day in a press conference, and he made sure to say that I said that he wasn't saying it, that the Stormers have this habit of sailing towards the top 8 towards the end of the season. And yet again, they do it this year. I mean, last weekend they beat Connacht convincingly, even though they were lucky to win at the end, and then with that try being disallowed. And then last night, you called it earlier the Italian test team. They dismantled the Italian test team. So where has this Stormers team been this entire season?
Well, I mean, as you know, we invented rugby in the Western Cape, and much of what we do around the world is derived.
You're smoking something in the Western Cape as well.
The 8-man scrum, Stellenbosch invention. The idea that we have a second row and then 1/8 at the back, Stellenbosch, Doc Craven kind of stuff. Offloads, definitely a Western Cape thing. Sasha Feinberg and Gonzulu could reinvent certain parts of the game if he's allowed to do it and if he can stay healthy, because he's a weird combination of things. He's like, take all the best sides of Warwick Galant, but then take out the bad goof troop stuff. And there you have Sasha. Take out, the space problem of seeing things. He seems to see things before other people do. Doesn't really matter which side of his foot he kicks the ball. It seems to obey him. I thought one of the most magic plays, so Jan-Hendrik Wessels was a perfect Bulls play. And I've always accused Bulls guys, fans, or the whole thing of being too grumpy, like disproportionately grumpy. Like, you should be happier because the team is sailing. Life is good. Why are you so pessimistic? What is this, this downward phase? And then Stormers are the opposite, like unjustifiably happy and ridiculously disobeying the doctrines of rugby. But when it does come together, I gotta say, it's super magic, and you just kind of start to you imagine immediately a Bulls pack and a Stormers back line, and just, like your brain goes that way, and then throw in the Sharks reinforcements. But 7 tries to 1, 23 defenders beaten, offloads aplenty. There were several movements where it was like Ruben offloading to Marcel Tennyson, offloading to Sasha to Ruas getting the back offload. I mean, it was just clown. Lots of turnovers both ways, kind of even. But here's one of the interesting facets of that game. Stormers only penalized 5 times, And almost all that 5 was at the scrum. I mean, who would know? That's a Stormers stalwart. Is even in Super Rugby, you just couldn't beat the Skara, Bongi, Kitsi, France Malherbe's scrum. It was incredible. And now, if the Stormers don't get there and make a nice run at the end, it'll be because of their scrum. If they do get there and trouble people and become the Munster of this year, remember 2 years ago, Munster made that long run and did it. It'll be because they get just enough okay in the scrum, and then we overwhelm you with our finishing. The finishing was insane, and there were probably 3 or 4 tries left on the field. The combination of Sasha and Gaza 10-12, when that works, it's magic. It's to go back in time, it's a little bit like Dan Carter and Sonny Bill Williams in that you have a double threat, 2 feet, offloading. You don't know who to tackle because when Sasha is running at you with Willemse behind and next to him, or vice versa, like what do? Who's the pivot? And so it was actually really exciting, entertaining thing. The big play. So the Jan Hendrik Wessels running back 50 meters and cradling a certain try scorer, sticking a dummy in his mouth and singing him a lullaby. That was the cool play for the Bulls. And it typified the Bulls, right? So best play was by a prop, and the prop ran 50 meters and emasculated someone. Then for the Stormers, the best play is Sasha getting taken out in the air, using the Italian guy as a table or chair to sit on so he doesn't really get hurt, gathers his thoughts, realizes the ref is doing a penalty for being taken out in the air, does a quick tap and go off of a taken out in the air penalty. Usually that involves TMO and slow down. He just uses that chair of the Italian player as his bum spring, taps, goes, and starts scampering, does sort of a dummy back out of the hand, perfect spiral, and it's done in 2 seconds. You're scoring, and then he's banging it at the top of the stands for a conversion. That kind of quick thought, that instinctiveness, and the mazy way in which he runs, added to the fending ability, because there was one play where he fended 3 times, and he had his fend out early too. He just got some physicality to him. Yeah, that has to make everyone excited. So when you're talking about who faces who in the quarterfinals, it is hard to imagine a better matchup, though. Stormers, Bulls. No. And our WhatsApp group will be insane.
Yeah, well, you're outnumbered, bro. You're the lone Stormer in that Bulls group, I'll tell you that much.
I'm going to bring some guys in.
Nah, we've got passes here, We've sort of brainwashed Andre Pretorius as well now. He's also in there. So talking of
I feel like he's on my side.
Nah, he's not. Andre Pretorius and I did our latest episode on the Springbok fly-offs and talking about Sasha. You just talked about Sasha, how clever he is in the air. Andre highlighted that with a specific clip, and what you just talked about is exactly what Andre was saying. Sasha is an extremely intelligent player, above and beyond everything else that he's got, all the other attributes. He's so intelligent. That makes a huge difference. So don't miss it. The link is on the screen here. So talk to me about the other teams quickly. I don't want to talk about the Lions too much. I mean, they're just up and down and hot and cold, and you never know what you can expect. And this weekend they put away Connacht. Okay, who knew? Lots of ructions there, by the way. Apparently some very mysterious knee injuries conjured up to cover up some argy-bargy between the players. I'll talk to you about that off air. Talking about the Sharks. You talked about Glasgow earlier before we started recording. Glasgow performing better than the players have got at their disposal, which is the exact opposite of the Sharks, who are now playing worse than the players at their disposal. And again this weekend, 19-0 behind and coming from behind to win it, 22-19. What on earth is happening at the Sharks? They cannot. I don't know what's going on there, but they're probably not going to end up in 4th. We're predicting them to end up in 6th. Am I right?
Yeah, the Sharks are an enigma. So if you look at the way the Lions won, they regained 8 kicks. All of the kicks they put up, they took back 8. That's devastating, especially because Connacht had none. but that's a terrible edge, Sharks, they regained 2 kicks. How is that possible with Hendrickson brothers, 2 bucks at your 9-10, the height that Fussy has and the ability in the air, why is that not more organized? It's not organic. Kick chases are very organized, almost like little set pieces unto themselves. And in Bokland, they do 4-man or 3-man chases, and they have someone going beyond to get the scraps, the butcher. They have Eben or Peter Steff doing the actual chase, or Achia, who's who's going to beat them in the air just to bother. And then you have someone lagging, like a Sio Khaleesi, or Elrich, to be like a dominant tackler, barge, or cleanup man. And then you have someone lurking, like a Damon De Allende, who's just clever with loose ball. When you get a properly weighted, good hang time, 4-second kick that's landing in the most awkward spot, about 13, 14 meters down on a box kick, and you've got that array of customers coming to get it, with the laws being that you have to allow access to the catcher, it's amazing. Why the Sharks not doing that? Like, my Pimpy loves to chase things all day long. He's a really good chaser. Sio Khaleesi literally is part of that band. You have forwards that are drilled in the Bokland mystique of chase. You only get 2 kicks regained. Like, the Sharks didn't even get penalized that much, so there's not even that to blame. They had 58% of territory. They had 55% of the ball. It's just unbelievably underperforming. And yet, here they are in 4th place.
Well, no.
So there's still a narrative here where the Sharks, Bulls, and Stormers are all battling in a Hunger Games for something. They could either narrowly avoid each other, or they could run into each other in Demolition Derby. And who knows? I've seen people run out permutations, and one thing that Urk really is not very, very, very weak at, is amazing and the best, is graphics and pointing out the road, the pathway, and it's going to be really cool to see what's happening this week. I love the way it looks. It's a cool color. It's very clear, and I want to see that. I've done some of it myself, and I just get myself into a headache. Another thing I want to point out with the Sharks is they don't play to their strengths. It's almost like they're trying to play a different brand that would really suit them. I look at the Sharks and say, you're the top gain line team in the whole competition almost. So why are you not ramming it down someone's throat? Why are you not keeping the ball in front of your heavy forwards? Why are you not putting up 4-second hang time chases? And why are you only getting 2 back, whereas Ulster got 7 back? If you invite a team like Ulster, like that, into the match, like Sharks did, they're going to say, thank you very much. We'll take the opportunity. I'll do it. That being said, I really was impressed by how the Sharks closed the deal. And so there's a little part of me that thinks that there was an awakening in the Bulls this weekend about, we can play anywhere in the world and win. I like that. If it was the Stormers saying, let's actually exit properly, so good exits, proper fundamentals, you're putting Ruiz in the right positions to storm, and then we can, do the fun stuff and win. That's a good reawakening. Lions, coming back to sort of what they did in the beginning of the season and it working for them. I suppose for the Sharks, it would be this sort of epiphany, I suppose is the word, where you say, when we set our mind to it, and when we do the right things on the rugby pitch, and we down whatever it was, 22 a lot, or 19, it was a very large lead.
19,
yeah, we can just march. We're like an infantry. And then we have some, airplanes dropping bombs, and we'll catch those too. Just do it the right way, and don't worry so much about the fanfare and whether it looks cool. And, just tell Jaden to clear the ball from the base of the ruck as soon as possible. Jordan, get that ball distributed. Find Andre, clean the first ruck, and get Hooker as many chances with the ball as possible, and find the channels for Fussy. And as a pack, we'll promise you as a pack, we'll keep the ball in front of you. We'll keep you marching forward. Keep your boots clean. Let's go. I don't see any reason why the Sharks wouldn't be a very, very tough out in a playoff game. They have every material you would need to play knockout rugby.
Okay, I'm going to just read out, and I'm going to put it on the screen here as well, what you predicted, and I agree with you on this, how it's going to end up. First Leinster, second Bulls. And we say that because we think Leinster is going to send an AB team for that game against Glasgow. Glasgow might win it, but they won't get a bonus point. So they're only going to score 4 points, which means they'll get 9, and the Bulls will get 10, and the Bulls will win back that bonus point they lost or they didn't go for at the previous. So Leinster first, Bulls second, Glasgow Warriors third. Then the Stormers in 4th place. Who would have believed it? Then 5th, Cardiff. That's another surprise a bit. Sharks in 6th. Scarlets in 7th. And then Edinburgh in 10th, which basically means Leinster versus Edinburgh, Bulls versus Scarlets, Glasgow versus the Sharks, and then the Stormers versus Cardiff. That's some, and it's nice home games for us as well. South African teams. It's nice to set up.
And stay away from each other until the next round.
That's why I don't want them to play against each other here. No, man.
So in our perfect world, that's what happens. And we're not wish casting. This actually can happen. It can happen because of the way the first tiebreaker you go to is just number of wins. And you can go there also because I don't think that even an AB or possibly a proper Leinster team, because you don't want to go into champions semifinals undercooked. And Leinster is a high rep team, the highest ruck count, so they need to get in there and do a lot of those things. You just cannot walk in cold against a really dangerous Saints team. So I think they're going to send a proper team with the ability to yank people off early. So I think it'll be the actual starting team, and then you have the early hook at 55 minutes, 50 minutes, so you prevent injury. And so that's why I think not only could Glasgow not win, I also think Glasgow is almost certainly in that situation not denying Leinster a bonus point and also struggling to get a bonus point.
Yep.
So if that's true, then the Bulls have the inside track. They're in pole position to go to number 2 because of how it lies out. Because of rest factor, all the boys now get to go home to Pretoria and hang out with their families, recharge, reset, and then come rip-roaring into their home fortress. Similarly, Stormers have the dream end. They've always had the dream end waiting for them, and they just had to get people healthy and returning from various suspensions and other things. So there is a way where the Stormers also end, getting maximum points. It's very intriguing, the idea of having a sort of test run against a team and then playing them in the regular season and in the knockouts. That's also interesting. But there's a part of me that thinks the story about the Sharks this season is just they're going to win ugly and just keep winning ugly and just win by 1 point when they should win by 10 and frustrating people. And maybe that's okay. Maybe that's as it should be. What's funny about this whole thing and how it sets up is I think, every team, every country that's in the URC has a representative up at the top, which is also cool because it makes everyone interested.
2 Welsh teams. Who would have believed that in the top 8? I mean, geez.
Yeah, our friend of South African rugby, Paul Williams, who everyone should follow because he's a straight shooter about, who's good and who's not, is really, he was apologizing this weekend for being too excited about Leinster's loss. Because he goes, I know it wasn't a real team and all, but still, come on, give us something.
That's cool. This is what I'm saying. If you look at, if those are the quarterfinals, this is what the semis are going to be. Leinster versus the Stormers in Ireland, Bulls versus Glasgow at Loftus. And I'm telling you now, talk about redemption and revenge, whatever R word you want to use, it's going to be something of an R. And then final Leinster Bulls in Glasgow, in Dublin. I'm calling it now, today.
Final Stormers Bulls. We're going to hammer Leinster in Dublin. We're going to bamboozle them. Jacques Nienaber is going to be throwing his hat in the coach's box, punching a hole in the wall. Sasha Feinberg, Ngomazulu, reinventing rugby. I'll write it down.
Well, I'm not going to deny that. I mean, I think it's a bit of wishful thinking.
I like overreacting.
No, that's something you were talking about. You were smoking earlier. I'm serious. That's stronger than I thought.
I'll take your Antoine Dupont over prognostication, and I'll double down on a less than 10 cap.
Yeah, man, we've got Johan Goos, and we need Sasha.
Hey, Houston is the undercovered story of this tandem of games.
True.
With a proper healthy, Houston's one of those guys who's always injured, like even in his mind. Like you've played with these guys, they're always on the practice pitch, like favoring one of their legs, and but that's just the way he is. He is such a good operator when he's on, and the whole thing looks different. I suppose my question for you, and it's a Bulls insider question: do you see Villy coming on to start, or is it Devin Williams at 15 from here to the end?
No, well, for the next 2 games, it's going to be A, B team or B, A team for that matter.
No, for knockouts though.
No, yeah, I'm saying they're going to keep Villy warmish.
Yeah.
But he'll start. It's going to be big gun, all the guns blazing. Those last 3 games.
Interesting.
Quarter, semi, and final. Big guns all the way. I mean, Jake's not going to let it slip again. Make no mistake. He's going to go down fighting.
Yeah.
You know him now.
It's getting exciting now. And no, I think, we definitely the spoilers. The Stormers are the spoilers because, no one's talking about it. It's sort of under the radar. The Glasgow Bulls thing has turned into a proper rivalry. Let's just call it that. That's it. Yeah, it's on.
No, that's the thing. They can say what they want to about the URC, but we've seen new rivals, like you just said. Mention Leinster, and you go, mention Glasgow, like the Encores and the Black Devils. We hate them. So we have got a point to prove, man.
The most important reason why the URC is better than Super Rugby at this moment in time is, Ireland and South Africa basically are top 3 teams. We're number 1. We have sort of a bogey team in Ireland. But it's top 2 of the top 3 teams, and the problem for Super Rugby is it's stuck in this kind of mode right now where Australia has to sort of come back in. Otherwise, it's a number 3 and number 9 or number 8 team. And that's just the way it is. There's no way to get around it, and it's worse because it's really a feeder competition for their test teams. So it's very easy to extrapolate backwards and forth to go how the quality looks. So, yeah, no one should worry about these the comparisons. As long as Ireland is as good as it is right now, and as long as South Africa is doing as well as it's doing, and you just have these like Benetton being basically a test team, and the 2 Scottish teams being difficult characters. No, I think it's alive and well. We just need Wales to come back. And I'm a big believer in DNA and so forth in sports, and the idea of, the blood of the saints and memories. And Wales is too good to just go gently into that dark night.
Look where we were, 2018, South Africa.
Yeah.
Look where we are now. I mean, nothing's impossible. I just want to say something I want to clarify. I don't hate anybody, people. I'm just metaphorically hating them before I get slaughtered again or crucified, please. I like the rivalry. That's what I'm getting. A new rivalry.
Yeah.
So that's the nice thing about it.
Spicy.
Like you said, Stephen Donald doesn't even know who the French players are. We know who all the Scottish players are, and they know who we are. And I love that. That's nice. Thanks, Harry. That was good, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, cheers.
It's the Lekker Rugby Pod, only on Megaphone Rugby.